You found my wallet. Don't make the mistake everyone else makes. The voice on the other end of the phone was calm. Too calm. Ethan Brooks stood frozen on the shoulder of a dark Montana highway, rain hammering the hood of his delivery van, $15,000 in cash sitting in his lap, and a leather patch that read, Hell's Angels, staring back at him like a warning he hadn't asked for. Before we go any further, if stories like this keep you up at night, thinking about what you would have done, hit subscribe, stay with me until the very end, and drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I love seeing how far across the world these stories travel. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The rain had been falling for 6 hours straight, and Ethan Brooks had been driving for almost all of them. 14-hour shift, number 11 that week. His knuckles were white on the wheel, not from the weather, but from the kind of exhaustion that sits behind a man's eyes and doesn't leave even when he closes them. He didn't sing along to the radio anymore. He didn't think about much of anything except the next delivery, the next exit, the next gas station bathroom where he'd splash cold water on his face just to keep from drifting into the guardrail. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. He glanced down. Claire. He picked it up, voice instantly softer than it had been in his own head a half second earlier. Hey, baby, you okay? I'm fine, Claire said. Her voice was thinner than it used to be. Thinner than it had been a year ago before the diagnosis, before the word leukemia became a permanent resident in their house. I just wanted to hear your voice before I tried to sleep. I'll be home in 2 hours, maybe less if this rain lets up. Don't rush. I don't want you rushing on these roads. I won't. Ethan. Yeah, I love you. You know that, right? Even on the nights you come home looking like you haven't slept in a week. He laughed, but it came out tired. I love you too, Claire. Get some rest. I'll be there before you know it. He hung up and set the phone back in the cup holder, and for a moment, just a moment, he let himself feel the full weight of everything sitting on his chest. The medical bills stacked in the kitchen drawer that wouldn't close anymore. The insurance company that kept finding new ways to say no. The treatments that worked slowly, painfully, expensively, while his savings account turned into a number with too many zeros after a minus sign. He didn't resent Claire. He could never resent Claire. She was the reason he got up every morning, the reason he kept driving long after his body told him to stop. But some nights alone on these dark roads, he let himself feel how unfair it all was, just for a minute. Then he'd put it away like he always did and keep driving. That was the moment the wallet appeared in his headlights. It happened so fast he barely had time to react. A thick, dark shape lying dead center in his lane, and his body moved before his brain caught up, jerking the wheel hard to the right. The van fishtailed slightly on the wet asphalt tires, screaming for half a second before catching again. His heart slammed against his ribs. What the hell? He pulled onto the shoulder, breathing hard, hands shaking on the wheel. For a second, he just sat there, letting his pulse settle, telling himself it was nothing. A rock. Debris. Something that fell off a truck. But something made him look in the rearview mirror. It was still there, sitting in the rain, untouched by passing cars because there were no passing cars. Not at this hour, not on this stretch of empty Montana highway. He should have watched driving. He knew that even as he was putting the van in park. But something about it nagged at him. He grabbed his flashlight from the glove box, stepped out into the rain, and walked back toward the shape in the road. It was a wallet, thick black worn leather, heavier than any wallet had a right to be. He picked it up. The first thing he noticed was the weight. The second thing he noticed when he flipped it open under the beam of his flashlight was the cash. Bills folded thick, more than he'd seen in one place in years. He didn't count it right there in the rain. That felt wrong somehow, like counting another man's blood, but his eyes did the math anyway. Easily $10, maybe $15,000. His breath caught. For one full second, the world narrowed down to a single dangerous thought. This could save her. It hit him like a physical blow. The thought arriving fully formed before he could stop it. $15,000. That was months of treatment. That was breathing room. That was the difference between watching Claire fight this disease in a hospital with proper care and watching her fight it while he lay awake every night doing math that never worked out. He stood there in the rainwater, running down the back of his collar, staring at the cash in his hands, and for one terrifying moment, he let himself imagine it. Taking it. Driving home. Telling Claire he'd gotten a bonus or a loan or anything that wasn't the truth. No one would ever know. No one was watching. The road was empty. The night was dark. The wallet had no name on it that he could see. No one would ever know. But then his fingers moved instinctively, flipping past the cash, searching for something, anything that might tell him whose life he was holding in his hands. Because that was who Ethan Brooks was underneath the exhaustion and the debt and the desperation. He was a man who couldn't just take something that wasn't his, even when his wife's life might depend on it. Tucked behind a stiff leather flap, his fingers found a folded patch. He pulled it free and held it up to the flashlight beam. His stomach dropped. Hell's angels. The patch was old, worn at the edges, clearly something carried for years rather than purchased for show. Beneath it, tucked even deeper, was a small scrap of paper, a phone number handwritten in blocky, deliberate letters. No name, no address, just 10 digits and nothing else. Ethan stood there in the rain for a long moment, water dripping off his nose, staring at that number, like it might answer the question screaming in his head. What do I do now? He thought about Claire. He thought about the bills. He thought about every single night he'd lain awake calculating how many more shifts he'd need to pick up, how many more hours he could squeeze out of a body that was already running on fumes. And then he thought about something his father used to say to him when he was a boy. Something he hadn't thought about in years. Son, your name is the only thing in this world that's truly yours. Don't ever let money convince you to sell it. He closed the wallet. He walked back to his van, climbed inside, and sat there for a full minute, rain drumming on the roof, before he picked up his phone and dialed the number on the scrap of paper. It rang twice. Then a voice answered, low, even. The kind of voice that had clearly said far more dangerous things to far more dangerous men and had never once needed to raise itself to be heard. Yeah, Ethan's mouth went dry. Hi, my name's Ethan Brooks. I think I found something that belongs to you. A wallet. I found it on Highway 93 just south of Missoula. There was a long pause, long enough that Ethan wondered if the call had dropped. Then the voice spoke again, and this time there was something different in it, something sharper, something that made the hair on the back of Ethan's neck stand up. You found my wallet. Yes, sir. Another pause. Tell me something, Ethan. The way the man said his name made it clear he had been listening closely. Is there cash in it? Ethan's heart pounded. Yes, there's a lot of cash in it. How much? I didn't count it. I didn't think that was my business. The silence on the other end of the line stretched out so long that Ethan actually pulled the phone away from his ear to check the call hadn't disconnected. When the man finally spoke again, his voice had changed entirely. Lower, almost private, like he was speaking to himself as much as to Ethan. You found my wallet. Don't make the mistake everyone else makes. Ethan's chest tightened. I'm not going to take anything if that's what you're asking. I called because it's yours. I want to give it back. That's what they all say at the beginning. I mean it. Everybody means it, the man said, until they're standing alone in the dark holding $15,000 and nobody's watching. Ethan swallowed hard, the words landing like a punch because they were exactly the thought that had gone through his own head not 2 minutes earlier. How did you know it was 15,000? Because I counted it before I lost it. A short pause. Where are you right now? Pulled off on the shoulder of 93. There's a gas station about 2 miles up the road, the one with the blue sign. I can meet you there. Don't move. Excuse me. I said don't move, Ethan. Stay exactly where you are. Something about the way the man said it sent a cold thread of fear through Ethan's chest, sharper than anything the rain or the exhaustion had managed all night. Why what now? Because that wallet's got a tracker sewn into the lining. Has for 2 years. I already know exactly where you are. I knew the second you picked it up. Ethan's blood went cold. He looked down at the wallet sitting on the passenger seat like it had suddenly become something alive. I don't understand, Ethan said slowly. If you knew where it was the whole time, why didn't you just come get it yourself? The man on the phone exhaled, and for the first time, Ethan heard something underneath the calm. Something tired, something strained, something that sounded almost like grief, held together by sheer discipline. Because the wallet wasn't lost, son, the man said. It was put there, and I needed to see what kind of man would pick it up. Ethan's mouth went dry. Put there by who? That's the question, isn't it? A pause, heavier this time. Listen to me very carefully, Ethan Brooks. In about 10 minutes, 2 trucks are gonna come down that highway. Don't run, don't panic. And whatever you do, don't open that wallet again until I'm standing in front of you. Wait, the line went dead. Ethan sat in the driver's seat, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to nothing but the dial tone and the rain hammering the roof of his van. His hands were shaking now, and not from the cold. He looked at the wallet again. Innocent looking. Black leather slightly damp sitting there, like it hadn't just turned his entire night into something he didn't understand and couldn't control. A tracker. 2 trucks. 10 minutes. He thought about driving away. The keys were still in the ignition. He could pull back onto the highway right now, drop the wallet at the gas station, call the police, wash his hands of the entire thing. That would be the smart move. That would be the safe move. But some instinct, the same instinct that made him search for a name instead of pocketing the cash, told him that driving away now would be far more dangerous than staying put. Whoever had planted that wallet, whoever had been watching long enough to track its exact location, was not someone Ethan wanted finding him on a dark stretch of empty highway with nowhere to run. So he stayed. 8 minutes later, headlights appeared in his rearview mirror. Not 1 set, 2. Engines that didn't sound like trucks at all, deeper, throatier, a sound that vibrated through the floor of his van even before the vehicles came close enough to see clearly. Motorcycles, a whole line of them cutting through the rain like they didn't feel it. Ethan's pulse hammered as the bikes pulled up behind him, then alongside him, headlights washing his van in white light. He counted 6 of them. Then a 7th, separate from the others, parking directly behind his rear bumper, boxing him in. Doors he didn't have opened. They were all on bikes, but men dismounted in heavy boots, leather jackets, slick with rain patches on their backs, that Ethan recognized immediately from the one folded inside the wallet. Hell's Angels. His stomach dropped straight through the floor of the van. One man approached his window, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, somewhere in his 50s, with the kind of face that had clearly seen more violence than Ethan could imagine, and had stopped being surprised by any of it a long time ago. He tapped 2 knuckles against the glass. Ethan rolled the window down, rain immediately spraying sideways into his face. "You Ethan Brooks?" "Yes, sir." "Step out of the van." Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He thought about Claire. He thought about how she'd react if he simply didn't come home tonight, if his van turned up abandoned on Highway 93 with no explanation. He thought about every terrible decision that had led him to this exact moment, and how the only thing he'd actually done wrong was tell the truth. He opened the door and stepped out into the rain. The man, clearly the one in charge, studied him for a long moment, eyes moving from Ethan's exhausted face down to his soaked work uniform and back up again. Something in his expression shifted slightly, not softened exactly, but recalculated. "You're the delivery driver?" "Yes, sir." 14-hour shifts, 5-6 days a week. It wasn't a question. The man already knew. "Sick wife at home." Ethan's breath caught. "How do you know that?" The man ignored the question. "Where's the wallet?" "Passenger seat. I didn't touch anything else inside it. I didn't count the money. I didn't take the patch out except to find a way to contact you." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, studying him the way a man studies something he's trying to decide is real or a very convincing lie. "Get it," he said, slowly. Ethan reached back into the van, picked up the wallet with 2 fingers like it might bite him, and held it out. The man took it, flipped it open right there in the rain, and went through it, methodically counting the cash with practiced speed, checking the lining, running his thumb along a seam that Ethan hadn't even noticed. Then he stopped. His jaw tightened. "It's all here," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Every dollar. I told you I wasn't going to take anything." The man looked up at him, and for the first time something genuinely unreadable passed behind his eyes. Not suspicion anymore. Something closer to disbelief. "Son," he said slowly, "do you have any idea how many men would have driven straight past this wallet without stopping? And how many of the ones who did stop would have been 40 miles away with this cash before they even thought about a phone number? I just figured it wasn't mine to keep." That's not an answer most men give anymore. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. The man studied him another long moment, rain running down both their faces, the other bikers standing in a loose half circle behind him, silent watching. Then he extended his hand. "Logan Carter." Ethan shook it. The grip was firm, calloused the hand of a man who'd worked with his hands his whole life in ways that had nothing to do with delivery routes. Ethan Brooks. I know, Logan said. Pulled your name off the side of that van about 30 seconds before I called you. That should have been unsettling. It was unsettling, but there was something underneath Logan's words that made Ethan pause, a weight, a tiredness that didn't match the cold authority in his voice a few minutes ago. Mr. Carter, Ethan said carefully, can I ask you something? You can ask. You said the wallet wasn't lost. You said somebody put it there. Ethan glanced at the patch in Logan's other hand. What's actually going on? Logan's expression darkened in a way that had nothing to do with the storm. He looked past Ethan out toward the dark tree line beyond the shoulder of the highway, and for several seconds he said nothing at all. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped to something low and controlled, the voice of a man holding himself together through sheer force of will. My sister's missing, he said. 2 days now. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry yet. Logan turned back to him, and the look in his eyes had shifted into something hard and focused. Be useful instead. I don't understand. What does any of this have to do with me? Logan held up the wallet. This wasn't an accident, Ethan. Somebody wanted us chasing our tails looking for a stolen wallet instead of looking for Emma. They wanted to waste our time, slow us down, send us in circles. His eyes locked onto Ethan's. Except you didn't take the bait. You didn't run with the money, and you didn't disappear. You called. You waited. And that means whoever planted this thing is sitting somewhere right now, expecting us to be hours behind where we actually are. Okay, Ethan said slowly, but I still don't see what that has to do with me specifically. Logan's eyes flicked toward the van. Your dash cam, he said. Is it still running? Ethan blinked. Yeah, it's always running. It's required for the delivery company. Then somewhere on that little memory card, Logan said, might be the only lead we have left. For a long moment, the only sound on that empty stretch of Montana highway was the rain hitting metal and asphalt and the low idle of 7 motorcycle engines. Ethan stood there, soaked through heart still hammering, staring at a man he'd known for less than 10 minutes, who had just told him his honesty might be the key to finding a missing woman he'd never met. You want to check my dash cam, Ethan said slowly. I need to check your dash cam. For what exactly? For whatever vehicle dropped that wallet on this stretch of highway tonight, Logan said. Because somebody drove out here, somebody got out of their car long enough to set it in the road exactly where they knew a driver running this route would have to stop or swerve, and somebody drove away again. And your camera was running the entire time. Ethan felt something heavy settle into his chest. Not fear exactly, though there was plenty of that too, but something closer to the weight of being pulled into a current far stronger than he was. Mr. Carter, he said, I'm a delivery driver. I don't do this kind of thing. Nobody's asking you to do anything you don't want to do. Then why does it feel like I already don't have a choice? Logan's expression didn't soften, but something in it acknowledged the truth of what Ethan had just said. Because right now, the only image of the people who took my sister might be sitting in the back of your van. And once I see it, I can't unsee it. And neither can you. The rain kept falling. The bikers kept watching. And somewhere out in the dark Montana mountains, a woman named Emma Carter was still missing, and a man named Ethan Brooks, exhausted, broke desperate but unwilling to compromise the only thing he had left that no medical bill could touch, was about to find out exactly how far one honest decision could carry him. He looked at Logan. He looked at the wallet still in Logan's hand. He thought about Claire asleep at home waiting for him, completely unaware that her husband was standing on the side of a highway surrounded by Hell's Angels, about to hand over footage that might lead to either a rescue or something far more dangerous. Okay, Ethan said finally, his voice steadier than he felt. Let's see what's on it. Logan nodded once, like that answer had confirmed something he already suspected about the man standing in front of him. Pull the van around, he said. We've got work to do. And as Ethan climbed back behind the wheel, hands still trembling slightly on a steering wheel that suddenly felt heavier than it had an hour ago, he had no idea that the footage sitting quietly on that small memory card was about to drag him into the middle of a war. He never asked to be part of one that would test everything he believed about honesty, about courage, and about exactly how much one ordinary man could give before there was nothing left to give. The wallet had been bait. But Ethan Brooks had just become something far more dangerous to the people hunting Emma Carter. He had become a witness. Ethan pulled the van back onto the shoulder hands, still trembling, and Logan climbed into the passenger seat like he'd done it 1,000 times before, like the rain and the danger and the stranger behind the wheel meant nothing to him at all. Pull up the footage from tonight, Logan said. Start from when you left Missoula. Ethan reached for the small screen mounted near the dash, fingers fumbling with the buttons because his hands wouldn't stop shaking. It's going to take a second. The system's old. Take your time. Logan's voice was calm, but his eyes weren't. They were fixed on that little screen like it was the only thing left in the world. The footage loaded grainy and gray, timestamped from 2 hours earlier. Ethan scrubbed forward, watching his own headlights cut through rain on an empty road, watching nothing happen for stretch after stretch of empty highway. Then at the edge of the frame, a pair of taillights appeared. There, Logan said sharply. Stop, right there. Ethan froze the image. A dark sedan parked on the shoulder, exactly where the wallet had been found, hazard lights blinking weakly through the rain. Play it forward. Slow. Ethan did. The footage rolled forward frame by frame, and the figure emerged from the driver's side of the sedan hood, up face hidden. Moving fast, dropping something into the road before climbing back inside and pulling away within seconds. Logan's jaw tightened so hard Ethan heard it click. Can you read the plate? Ethan squinted at the screen. The rain and the darkness blurred everything into smears of gray and red. I can't. It's too dark. Zoom in. This thing doesn't zoom, Mr. Carter. It's a basic dash cam. It's not. Then we'll find someone who can pull a clean frame off it. Logan's voice had gone hard-clipped all business now. He pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly with his thumbs, sending something to someone, his whole posture coiled tight, like a man holding back something enormous behind his ribs. Marcus needs to see this tonight. Who's Marcus? Doesn't matter right now. Logan glanced at him sideways. What matters is that car. That's the first real lead we've had in 2 days. Ethan sat there watching Logan's face in the dim glow of the dashboard lights, and something about the rawness in the man's expression made him forget for just a second that he was supposed to be afraid of him. Mr. Carter, he said quietly, what happened to your sister? Logan didn't answer right away. He kept staring at the frozen image on the screen, the hooded figure, the dark sedan, the wallet falling into the road in slow motion, like he could will more information out of the pixels if he just looked hard enough. Emma's a nurse, he finally said. Volunteers 2 nights a week at a clinic that serves migrant workers out past the old mining towns. 3 nights ago, she came home and told me that she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to see. Wouldn't tell me what. Said it was safer if I didn't know. His voice tightened. Next morning, she didn't show up for her shift. Her phone's been dead since. Her car's still parked outside her apartment. And you think whoever's behind this is the same person who planted the wallet? I don't think it, Logan said. I know it. Somebody wanted me burning daylight chasing a robbery story instead of chasing my sister. He looked at Ethan directly now, eyes hard. And it would have worked if you'd kept that money and disappeared like 99 men out of 100 would have. Ethan felt something twist in his chest, pride and fear tangled together in a way he didn't have a name for. I just did what felt right. Yeah. Logan's mouth tightened into something that wasn't quite a smile. I'm starting to understand that about you. The phone in Logan's hand buzzed. He glanced down, read something, and his whole body went rigid. What? Ethan asked. What is it? Marcus says he can clean up a still from a dash cam file if we get it to him in the next hour. Says it's the kind of thing law enforcement uses. Logan's eyes flicked up sharply. You're not going to want to hear what he asked me next. What did he ask? He asked if we were going through official channels or doing this ourselves. Ethan felt his stomach drop. And what did you tell him? Logan looked at him for a long moment, rain still drumming against the windshield, the silence stretching out heavy and dangerous between them. I told him the same thing I'm about to tell you, Logan said. The local sheriff's department took my sister's missing person report 2 days ago and did nothing. No search team, no urgency. You know why? Ethan shook his head slowly, though some sick part of him already suspected the answer. Because 3 years ago, Logan said, this club helped expose a county commissioner taking bribes from a logging company, clear-cutting protected land. Made some very powerful people very unhappy. And ever since then, anything that happens to anyone wearing this patch, he tapped the worn leather emblem, still sitting on the dashboard, Gets filed real slow if it gets filed at all. So you're telling me the police won't help you find her? I'm telling you, Logan said, voice low and dangerous, that we are the only people looking for Emma Carter tonight. And you just handed me the first real piece of evidence I've had since she disappeared. The weight of that sentence settled over Ethan like the rain still hammering the roof of the van. He thought about Claire. He thought about how simple his life had felt 20 minutes ago. Exhausted, broke, drowning in medical debt, but at least simple. Drive the route, make the deliveries, go home, repeat. Now he was sitting in the van with a senior member of the Hells Angels looking at grainy dash cam footage of a kidnapping in progress, being told he was the only lead in a missing person case the police had abandoned. What happens now? Ethan asked. Now, Logan said, already opening the door, rain rushing in around him. You give Marcus that memory card, and then you go home to your wife. Relief flooded through Ethan so fast it nearly made him dizzy. I can go home. Logan paused halfway out of the van, looking back at him with something unreadable in his expression. You did your part tonight, Ethan, more than your part. Nobody's asking you to do anything else. It should have felt like the end of something. It should have felt like Ethan could finally exhale, drive home, climb into bed next to Claire, and wake up tomorrow with this entire surreal night fading into something he'd barely believe had happened. Instead, as Logan climbed onto his motorcycle and the convoy prepared to pull away into the rain, Ethan felt something else entirely. He felt like he was about to make a decision that would change everything. Wait, Ethan called out, leaning out his window. Logan turned back, rain running down his face. Yeah, the memory card, Ethan said. Take it, but take me with it. Logan's eyebrows lifted slightly. Come again. You need someone to explain the footage. The timestamps, the route, what was around that stretch of highway before and after. I drive that road 4 nights a week. I know it better than anybody. Ethan's heart was pounding, but his voice came out steadier than he expected. And whoever your friend Marcus is, he's going to have questions about exactly where I was, what I saw, what else might be on that card from earlier in the night. I should be there. Logan studied him for a long moment, rain dripping off the edge of his helmet, something calculating behind his eyes. You understand what you're asking, Logan said slowly. This isn't a ride-along. This isn't a story you tell your buddies later. If we're right about what's happening here, the people who took my sister are not the kind of people who leave loose ends. I'm not asking to be a hero, Ethan said. I'm asking to finish what I already started. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The rain kept falling. The other bikers waited, engines idling, watching the exchange with the patient stillness of men who'd learned long ago not to rush Logan Carter's decisions. Finally, Logan nodded once sharp and final. Follow us, he said. And Ethan, yeah. Call your wife first. Tell her you're gonna be late. Don't tell her why. Ethan's hands shook as he dialed Claire's number, watching the line of motorcycles idle in his rearview mirror, rain streaking down the glass like the whole night was trying to wash away everything that had just happened. She picked up on the second ring voice, groggy with almost sleep. Ethan, everything okay? Everything's fine. He lied and hated himself a little for how easily it came out. Traffic's bad, accident up ahead, gonna be later than I thought. How much later? He looked at the convoy waiting for him at Logan's broad shoulders, silhouetted against his bike's headlight at the dark Montana mountains rising up beyond the highway, where somewhere a woman was being held against her will. A few hours maybe, he said. Don't wait up. Ethan, Claire's voice sharpened slightly, the fog of sleep clearing. You sound strange. I'm just tired, baby. Long night. There was a pause on the line long enough that Ethan wondered if she could somehow hear the engines idling behind him, somehow sense that her exhausted, broke, perfectly ordinary husband was about to drive deeper into the Montana wilderness with 7 members of the Hells Angels. Okay, she finally said, though something in her tone made it clear she didn't entirely believe him. Be careful, please. I will. I love you. I love you too. He hung up, sat there for one more second with the phone heavy in his hand, and then put the van in drive. The convoy moved. They drove for nearly 40 minutes, the bikes weaving through rain-slicked curves with a kind of reckless precision that made Ethan's knuckles go white on the wheel just trying to keep pace. The highway gave way to a smaller county road, then to something barely paved at all, winding up into hills, thick with dark pine trees, that swallowed the headlights whole. Finally, the convoy slowed in front of a low building set back from the road. A garage by the look of it, corrugated metal walls, and a single light burning over a side door. Logan was waiting by the time Ethan parked, already pulling off his helmet, rain matting his gray hair to his forehead. "This is Marcus's place," he said. "He used to do forensic work for the county before he got tired of watching cases get buried. Now he does it for people who actually want answers." Inside, the garage opened up into something that looked nothing like Ethan expected. Rows of monitors, server racks humming quietly, a setup that looked more like a small intelligence operation than anything that belonged in rural Montana. A heavy-set man in his 60s looked up from one of the screens, reading, glasses pushed up onto his forehead. "Logan, you said you had footage." "This is Ethan Brooks," Logan said, nodding toward him. "Delivery driver. Found Emma's wallet, or what was supposed to look like it was lost, on 93 about an hour ago." His dash cam caught the drop. Marcus's eyes moved to Ethan with new interest. "You're the one who didn't run with the cash." "News travels fast," Ethan muttered. "In this world," Marcus said, gesturing for them to come closer, "everything travels fast. Now give me that card." Ethan handed it over, and Marcus slid it into a reader connected to the largest monitor, fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced speed. The grainy footage Ethan had already seen once filled the screen again, larger now, sharper in some ways, but still maddeningly unclear. "There," Logan said, pointing. "Right there, the plate." Marcus zoomed in the image, fracturing into pixels, then slowly, painstakingly sharpening as some software Ethan didn't understand worked to clean up the frame. Seconds stretched into a full minute, then 2. "Got it," Marcus finally said. Logan leaned forward so fast he nearly knocked over a stack of papers. "Read it." Marcus read off a plate number and immediately typed it into another system. Lines of text scrolled past too fast for Ethan to follow. Then Marcus went very still. "Logan," he said slowly, "you are not gonna like this." "Tell me anyway." "That car's registered to a shell company. Same shell company that owns 3 other vehicles, 2 warehouses outside Butte, and..." Marcus paused, scrolling further down. "And a piece of property up near the old Caldwell mining claim." Logan's whole body went rigid. "The same property where Emma was running her clinic outreach last month." "Looks that way. That's not a coincidence." "No," Marcus agreed grimly. "It's not." Ethan stood there watching 2 men he'd known for less than an hour piece together what looked like genuine evidence of a kidnapping, and felt the full weight of what he'd stumbled into finally settle over him completely. "Who's the shell company tied to?" Logan asked. "Can you trace it back?" Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard again. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of servers and the rain still hammering the metal roof above them. "Working on it," Marcus muttered. "These guys buried it deep. Multiple layers offshore accounts the works. This isn't some local crook running a side hustle. Somebody with real money set this up." "How real?" "Real enough that I'm seeing transaction patterns that look a hell of a lot like a trafficking operation," Marcus said quietly. "Workers moving through, never staying long. Cash transfers that don't match any legitimate business. And, he paused again, jaw tightening, "at least 2 missing persons reports filed in the last 6 months from workers connected to addresses tied to this same company. Both reports closed within a week. No follow-up." The room went silent. Ethan felt sick. "You're saying this isn't just about your sister?" "I'm saying," Logan said, voice dropping into something low and lethal, "that Emma saw something real. Something big enough that whoever's running this needed her gone before she could tell anyone what she witnessed." "And the wallet," Ethan said slowly, understanding finally crystallizing. "They didn't just want to slow you down. They wanted to humiliate you. Make you waste hours hunting a thief while Emma..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "While Emma disappears into whatever's happening at that mining claim." Logan finished for him, voice flat and cold. "Yeah." Marcus looked up from his screen, expression grim. "Logan, if this is what I think it is, you can't just ride up there with 6 bikes and start kicking down doors. These people have resources. Probably security. Maybe worse. I'm aware. Then what's the play?" Logan was quiet for a long moment, staring at the map Marcus had pulled up on a second monitor, satellite imagery of the old Caldwell mining claim, a cluster of buildings half swallowed by forest access roads barely visible through the tree cover. "We need eyes on that property before we move," Logan finally said. "We need to know how many people, how it's guarded, where Emma's actually being held, if she's even there at all." "That takes time," Marcus said. "Time we might not have." "I know." Ethan, standing slightly apart from the two men, found himself studying the satellite image more closely than either of them seemed to notice. Something about the access roads looked familiar, the way they curved up through the hills, the way one logging road split off and ran parallel to the county line. "Wait," Ethan said suddenly. Both men looked at him. "That access road," Ethan said, pointing at the screen. "The one running northeast from the main property. I know that road." Logan's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean you know it?" "I deliver out to a hunting lodge 2 miles past there every other week. That road connects to an old logging trail that comes out behind the property, not through the main entrance." Ethan's mind was racing now, pulling up months of memorized routes, shortcuts back ways he'd learned through sheer repetition. If your security's watching the front approach, which they probably are, nobody's watching that back trail. It's barely passable. Most GPS systems don't even show it. Marcus and Logan exchanged a look. "You're sure about this?" Logan said. "I've driven it a dozen times. I know exactly where it washes out, where it narrows, where you'd need to walk the last stretch on foot." Ethan paused, hearing his own words and realizing with a jolt exactly what he was offering. "I could get you in there without being seen." The garage went quiet except for the hum of the servers. "Ethan," Logan said slowly, 20 minutes ago I told you to go home to your wife. I know what you told me. This is different. This isn't handing over a memory card. This is walking into the middle of whatever's happening on that property." "I know that too." "Why?" Logan's eyes searched his face, genuinely trying to understand. "You don't owe Emma anything. You don't owe me anything. You found a wallet on the side of the road and you did the right thing. That's already more than most men manage in a lifetime. You can walk out that door right now and nobody in this room would think less of you." Ethan thought about Claire asleep at home, completely unaware. He thought about the medical bills stacked in the kitchen drawer, the debt that swallowed a little more of their future every single month. He thought about how small and powerless he'd felt for the last year, watching the woman he loved fight for her life, while he could do nothing but work harder and watch the numbers keep losing. And he thought about the moment on that highway, standing in the rain with $15,000 in his hands, when he could have taken the easy way out and didn't. "Because somebody's sister is out there right now," Ethan said quietly, "and I might be the only person who knows a way to reach her that nobody else is watching. If I walk away and something happens to her and I find out later I could have helped," he shook his head, "I don't think I could live with that, not on top of everything else." Logan studied him for a long silent moment. Then he turned to Marcus. "Pull up everything you can on that logging trail. Satellite elevation, anything." He looked back at Ethan. "You're not going in alone and you're not going in armed. You're a guide, nothing more. The second things go sideways, you fall back. Understood?" "Understood." "I mean it, Ethan. My men can handle what's coming. You can't, and I'm not gonna be the reason your wife loses her husband on top of everything else she's already fighting." "Understood," Ethan said again, though something in his chest tightened at the mention of Claire, at the reminder of exactly how much he had to lose tonight. Marcus was already pulling up new images, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Logan, if we're doing this, we need to move fast. Whoever's running this operation knows by now that the wallet didn't work. Brooks didn't run with the cash, didn't disappear, and you've had over an hour to start connecting dots. If they're smart, and everything here says they're smart, they're already adjusting their plan." "Meaning what?" "Meaning if Emma's valuable to them, as leverage or as a witness, they need silenced. They might not wait around for you to figure out where she is." Marcus's voice was grim. "They might already be moving her." The words landed in the room like a physical blow. Logan's jaw clenched so tight Ethan could see the muscle working beneath his beard. "How fast can your men be ready?" he called out to the others, who'd been waiting near the door listening to everything. 15 minutes, one of them answered immediately. "Make it 10. The garage exploded into motion, men checking gear. Marcus printing out maps and satellite images. Logan pulling out his phone and making rapid-fire calls. Ethan couldn't follow. In the middle of it all, Ethan stood frozen for just a moment, the full weight of what he'd just agreed to finally crashing over him. He wasn't just handing over evidence anymore. He was about to lead a group of armed bikers through the Montana wilderness toward a property connected to a trafficking operation in a race against a clock that might already be running out. Logan appeared at his shoulder, pulling on a jacket, voice low and urgent. Last chance, Ethan. Say the word and you walk out that door right now. No questions, no judgment. Nobody will think less of you. Ethan looked at the satellite image still glowing on the screen. The mining claimed the buildings half hidden in the trees, the back road that only he seemed to know existed. He thought about the wallet, about the moment of temptation on that dark highway, about the choice he'd made when no one was watching. This wasn't so different, he realized, just a bigger version of the same choice. I'm not walking out, Ethan said. Let's go get her. Logan held his gaze for one more second, something that might have been respect flickering behind his tired eyes. Then let's move, he said and turned toward the door. Time's the one thing we don't have anymore. Outside, the rain had finally begun to ease, but the night had only grown darker, the kind of darkness that swallowed headlights whole and made every shadow feel like it was hiding something. Ethan climbed back into his van, hands steadier now than they'd been an hour ago, and watched in his mirrors as 7 motorcycles fell into formation behind him. Somewhere up in those black, rain-soaked mountains, Emma Carter was running out of time. And an exhausted delivery driver who'd never asked for any of this was about to become the one thing standing between her and whatever waited for her in the dark. The convoy moved through the dark in a tight, controlled line, Ethan's van leading the way, with 7 motorcycles trailing close behind, headlights cutting through mist that clung to the road like it didn't want them to reach where they were going. Logan rode just off Ethan's rear bumper, close enough that Ethan could see him in the side mirror every time the road straightened out. Every few minutes, Logan's voice crackled through a small radio Marcus had shoved into Ethan's hand before they left. Talk to me, Ethan. How much further to that turnoff? Ethan keyed the radio with one hand, eyes locked on the road. 3 miles, maybe 4. The trail entrance is easy to miss if you don't already know it's there. Copy that. He set the radio down and immediately felt his phone buzz in the cup holder. Claire's name lit up the screen. His stomach clenched. He couldn't answer it. Not now, not with 7 Hell's Angels riding behind him and a kidnapped woman somewhere ahead in the dark. He let it ring out, watched the screen go dark, and felt something heavy settle into his chest that had nothing to do with the danger of what they were about to do. I'm sorry, Claire. I'll explain everything. I just need you to trust me a little longer. The radio crackled again. Ethan, you still with us? Still here, he said, voice tighter than he wanted it to be. You don't sound it. My wife just called. I didn't pick up. There was a pause on the line just long enough that Ethan wondered if Logan understood exactly what that silence cost him. She's going to be angry, Logan finally said. She's going to be worried. That's worse. When this is over, Logan said, I'll make sure she knows the truth, all of it. Why you didn't come home, why you couldn't answer. Thank you, Ethan said quietly, and meant it more than he expected to. The trail entrance appeared exactly where Ethan remembered it, a narrow gap in the tree line, easy to miss. Unless a person already knew to look for it, marked only by a rusted, half-fallen fence post that had probably been there since before Ethan was born. This is it, Ethan said into the radio, slowing the van. From here it gets rough, real rough. I'd suggest killing your headlights once we're past this first stretch. Copy. Lead the way. The van bounced hard over ruts and exposed roots branches, scraping against the sides loud enough to make Ethan wince every single time it's certain the sound would carry for miles in the dead quiet of the mountain night. Behind him, the motorcycles navigated the broken trail with a kind of practiced ease that told him these men had ridden far worse roads than this one. 10 minutes in Ethan's headlights caught something that made his stomach drop. A washout deep and wide, cutting straight across the trail. He slammed the brakes, the van skidding slightly before stopping just short of the edge. His radio crackled immediately. What's wrong? Washout, Ethan said, voice tight. I didn't think it would be this bad. Last time I came through here, it was maybe half this size. Logan pulled up alongside the van window, peering past Ethan at the gap swallowed in darkness. Can the van make it? Not a chance, not without breaking an axle, maybe worse. Then we walk from here. Ethan's heart pounded. Walk? It's still at least a mile to the property line. Then we walk a mile, Logan said, already swinging off his bike. We're not turning back now, Ethan. Every minute we lose out here is a minute Emma doesn't have. The other bikers dismounted in near silence, pulling gear from saddlebags Ethan hadn't paid attention to before flashlights dimmed with red filters, what looked unmistakably like firearms secured against their bodies, faces set with the kind of grim focus that made Ethan's pulse spike all over again. He climbed out of the van slowly, legs unsteady beneath him, and Logan was there immediately gripping his shoulder. "You remember what I told you back at the garage? Guide only. Fall back if things go sideways." "Good." Logan's eyes were hard in the dim red light. "I need you to lead us to that back trail, show us exactly where the property opens up, and then you find cover and you stay there. No matter what happens, no matter what you hear, you stay down and you stay hidden until I come find you. Are we clear?" "Crystal." They moved into the trees, single file, Ethan in the lead with Logan close behind him, the rest of the men fanning out silently into the darkness on either side. The mile felt endless, every snapped twig sounding like a gunshot in Ethan's ears, every shadow shifting into shapes his exhausted mind insisted were watching them. Then through a gap in the trees, lights appeared. Ethan froze, dropping low instinctively, and felt Logan's hand land firmly on his shoulder, pulling him down further. Below them, maybe 200 yards out, sat a cluster of buildings, a main structure with lights burning in 2 windows, a smaller outbuilding set apart from it, and a single pickup truck parked near the entrance. A man stood near the truck, rifle slung casually across his back, smoking a cigarette like he had nowhere else to be. "One guard visible." Logan whispered, eyes scanning the property through a pair of binoculars Ethan hadn't even noticed him pull out. "There'll be more we can't see." "Is she in there?" Ethan whispered back. "The main building?" "I don't know yet." A second man emerged from the smaller outbuilding, exchanging a few words with the smoker before heading back inside. Through the gap in the door, just for a fraction of a second, Ethan caught a flash of movement, a shape that could have been a person sitting slumped, barely visible in the dim interior light. "There," Ethan breathed. "The outbuilding. I saw something move." Logan's binoculars snapped toward the structure immediately, and his entire body went rigid. "That's her," he said, voice cracking for the first time since Ethan had met him. "That's Emma." The relief in his voice was instantly swallowed by something darker, something that made the hair on Ethan's arm stand up. "She's alive," Logan said, "but we need to move now before they decide to move her first." He turned, signaling silently to the men spread out in the darkness around them. Hand gestures Ethan didn't fully understand but recognized as a plan clicking into motion. Within seconds, shapes began moving through the trees, circling wide around the property, vanishing into shadow with a discipline that told Ethan these men had done this kind of thing before, even if they'd never admitted out loud. "Ethan," Logan's voice was low, urgent, "this is where you stop." "I know. I mean it. There's a fallen log about 30 yards back, thick enough to take cover behind. You go there, you stay low, and you do not move until I find you. Understood?" Understood, but Ethan didn't move, yet. His eyes still locked on that outbuilding, on the faint shadow of a woman he'd never met, whose entire fate had somehow become tangled up with his own honesty on a rainy highway. "Logan." "What? Be careful." Something flickered across Logan's face in the dim light, surprise maybe, or something closer to gratitude. "Get to cover," he said, and then he was gone, melting into the darkness with the rest of his men. Ethan crawled backward through the underbrush until he found the fallen log Logan had described, pressing himself low against the damp wood heart, hammering so hard he was certain it could be heard from the property below. The radio in his pocket buzzed softly, Logan's voice barely above a whisper. "In position. On my signal." A long, agonizing silence stretched out. Ethan counted his own heartbeats, lost track somewhere past 60, started over. Then all at once, everything happened. A shout from near the truck, the guard spinning rifle coming up, and then a blur of motion as one of Logan's men closed the distance before the guard could fire, taking him down hard against the side of the pickup. More shouts erupted from inside the main building doors, banging open men pouring out into the dark, with weapons raised, and Ethan's whole body went cold with terror as gunfire cracked through the night air, sharp, brutal, impossibly loud after the silence of the past 20 minutes. He pressed himself flatter against the log hands over his ears, every instinct screaming at him to run, to hide, to be anywhere but here. But he couldn't stop watching. Through gaps in the brush, he caught fragments of chaos, Logan's men moving with terrifying precision, taking cover, returning fire, 2 of the armed men from the property going down within seconds of each other. A third man broke away, sprinting toward the outbuilding where Emma was being held, and Ethan's heart seized. He's going for her. He's going to use her as a shield or worse. Without thinking, without any plan beyond pure instinct, Ethan was moving crawling fast through the underbrush, completely ignoring everything Logan had told him. Eyes locked on the running man closing in on that small wooden building. "Ethan, get down." Logan's voice roared through the radio, but Ethan barely heard it over the blood pounding in his ears. The man reached the outbuilding door and wrenched it open, and Ethan saw her clearly now. A young woman, hands bound, eyes wide with terror, trying desperately to scramble backward away from him. Ethan didn't think. He grabbed a heavy fallen branch from the ground beside him and ran straight at the building, every rational thought drowned out by something far more primal. The man heard him at the last second, started to turn, weapons swinging around, and Ethan swung the branch with everything he had. It connected hard against the man's arm, knocking the weapon from his grip just as it discharged into the dirt, the gunshot deafening at such close range. The man staggered, cursing, and Ethan swung again, catching him across the shoulder, sending him sprawling into the dirt. Then strong hands grabbed Ethan from behind, hauling him backward, and he spun in terror before recognizing Logan's face, furious and relieved in equal measure. "I told you to stay down." "He was going for her," Ethan gasped. "I couldn't just... You could have gotten yourself killed." Behind them, two more of Logan's men secured the fallen attacker, and Logan released Ethan's arm just long enough to look past him toward the outbuilding, toward his sister huddled inside alive, terrified but alive. Emma. He moved past Ethan in an instant, dropping to his knees in front of her, hands shaking as he worked at the ropes binding her wrists. Emma sobbed his name, collapsing against him, and for a moment the gunfire and the chaos and the danger seemed to fall completely away, leaving only two siblings clinging to each other in the wreckage of a night that had nearly cost everything. But the moment didn't last. "Logan!" One of the bikers' voices cut through sharply from somewhere near the main building. "You need to see this, now." Logan helped Emma to her feet, keeping one arm wrapped protectively around her, and motioned for Ethan to follow as they moved toward the main structure. Inside, lit by a single hanging bulb, was something that made Ethan's stomach turn over completely. Filing cabinets, stacks of paper ledgers filled with names and numbers that meant nothing to Ethan but clearly meant everything to the grim-faced biker holding one open. "This isn't just about Emma," the man said quietly. "This is bigger. Names, dates, payment records. Looks like dozens of people moved through here over the past year alone." Wow. Emma's voice came out hoarse, exhausted, but steady. I told you it was bigger than just one bad guy with a gun." "You did," Logan said softly, pulling her closer. "And it almost got you killed." "It still might," Emma said, glancing nervously toward the door. Logan, the men running this, the ones actually in charge, they weren't here tonight. These were just guards, hired muscle. Whoever's really behind this is still out there. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a physical thing. "Then we don't have much time," Logan said grimly. "If word gets back to whoever's running this that we hit the property, they'll either run or they'll come after everyone who knows what's in those files." Emma finished, eyes wide with sudden fear. "Including me." Ethan stood near the doorway, watching this family reunion collide directly with a much larger, much darker reality, and felt the full scope of what he'd stumbled into finally crash over him completely. This wasn't over. Not even close. Logan turned to him suddenly, expression shifting into something Ethan hadn't seen from him yet. Not gratitude exactly, not quite respect, but something adjacent to both. "Ethan," he said, "what you did out there. I know I wasn't supposed to move. You probably saved my sister's life." The words landed heavier than Ethan expected, settling into his chest with a strange mixture of pride and exhaustion and disbelief that this entire night had actually happened, that he was actually standing here. "I just reacted," Ethan said quietly. "I didn't even think about it." "That's usually when people show you who they really are," Logan said, "when there's no time to think." Emma was watching this exchange with obvious curiosity, glancing between her brother and the exhausted stranger covered in mud and adrenaline standing near the door. "Who exactly are you?" "Ethan Brooks," he said. I'm... He paused, genuinely unsure how to summarize the last several hours. "I found your wallet." Emma blinked, then looked at her brother. "The wallet plan. You actually used the wallet plan." "It worked better than I expected," Logan admitted, "mostly because of him." Before Emma could respond, one of the bikers near the door called out sharply again. Logan headlights, coming up the main access road. Fast! Every head in the room turned at once. How many vehicles? Logan demanded. 2, maybe 3. Moving quick. Logan's face hardened into something cold and immediate. They know. Know what? Ethan asked, though some sick part of him already understood. That something went wrong here, Logan said, already moving, pulling Emma toward the door. Whoever's actually running this operation just found out their guards aren't answering, and now they're coming to find out why. We need to move, one of the bikers said urgently. Now. The files, Emma said, suddenly twisting back toward the cabinet. We can't leave those behind. They're the only proof. Grab what you can carry, Logan ordered. Fast. Chaos erupted around Ethan as bikers scrambled to gather documents, stuffing folders and ledgers into bags, while outside the sound of approaching engines grew steadily louder, closer, more urgent with every passing second. Ethan grabbed an armful of papers without even thinking, following Logan's lead, his exhausted body running purely on adrenaline at this point. Out the back, Logan commanded. Same way we came in. Ethan, you remember the trail. I remember it. Then lead us. They burst out into the darkness just as the first set of headlights crested the rise leading into the property, and Ethan didn't wait to see what happened next. He ran Emma close behind him, with Logan's hand still firmly on her shoulder, the rest of the bikers fanning out in protective formation around them, as gunfire erupted again behind them, closer this time, more chaotic. The mile back to the washed-out trail felt twice as long, in the dark branches tearing at Ethan's clothes, his lungs burning. Emma stumbling occasionally but never falling. Logan's steady presence keeping her upright through sheer determination. When they finally reached the vehicles, Ethan's hands were shaking too hard to find his keys. At first, fear and exhaustion colliding into something that made his whole body feel disconnected from his brain. Breathe, Logan said, gripping his shoulder firmly. You did it. We're out. They're still back there, Ethan gasped, glancing back the way they'd come, where distant gunfire still echoed faintly through the trees. My men can handle a fighting retreat. They know these woods now, too. Logan helped Emma into the back of Ethan's van, settling her gently against the seat, her hands still trembling from hours of captivity. Drive Ethan. Get her somewhere safe. I'll stay back. Make sure everyone else gets out clean. Logan, drive? Logan said again, firmer this time, already turning back toward the trail. I'll find you. Ethan didn't argue. He climbed into the driver's seat, hands finally steady enough to start the engine, and pulled away from that washed-out trail, with Emma Carter, rescued, exhausted, alive, sitting in his back seat, clutching a stack of stolen ledgers against her chest, like they were the only thing standing between her brother's enemies and justice. In the rearview mirror, Ethan watched the chaos of gunfire and shouting fade slowly into darkness behind them, and felt for the first time since picking up that wallet hours earlier, something that might have been hope. But as his phone buzzed again in the cup holder, Claire's name lighting up the screen for the second time that night, Ethan realized with a sudden sinking weight that the hardest part of this night might not be behind him at all. It might be explaining to his wife exactly where he'd been and exactly what he'd risked while she slept at home, completely unaware that her husband had just walked straight into the middle of someone else's war. Ethan's phone kept buzzing, Claire's name lighting up the screen over and over, and he finally reached over with one hand and answered it, keeping his eyes locked on the dark road ahead. Claire, I'm okay. Ethan, where are you? Her voice was sharp, awake now, fear cutting through every word. It's almost 3 a.m. You said a few hours. I know. I'm so sorry. Something happened. It's a long story. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. I promise I'm fine. In the back seat, Emma shifted, glancing toward him with an expression that was equal parts gratitude and concern, clearly hearing every word. Then what happened? Claire demanded. Ethan, you're scaring me. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Emma, at the stack of stolen ledgers still clutched against her chest, and made a decision in that moment that he hoped he wouldn't regret. I'll tell you everything when I get home, he said. I promise, just trust me a little longer. Please. There was a long silence on the line, heavy with everything Claire wasn't saying. Okay, she finally whispered. Just come home safe. I will. He hung up, and the silence in the van stretched out for a moment before Emma spoke quietly from the back seat. You didn't tell her. I didn't know how to explain any of this over the phone, Ethan admitted. How do I even start? Hey, honey, I found a Hells Angels wallet, and then I helped storm a trafficking compound in the mountains. A small, exhausted laugh escaped Emma despite everything. When you say it like that, it does sound insane. It sounds insane because it is insane. They drove the rest of the way to Marcus's garage, mostly in silence. Emma occasionally glancing nervously out the windows, flinching at every set of headlights that passed in the opposite direction. By the time they pulled up to the corrugated metal building, the sky had begun to lighten faintly at the edges, the first gray hints of dawn pushing back against a night that had felt endless. Marcus was already waiting at the door, and the moment he saw Emma climb out of the van, something in his weathered face shifted with visible relief. "Thank God," he muttered, ushering them inside quickly. Logan radioed ahead, said you were on your way, said the operation went sideways at the end. "Is he okay?" Emma asked immediately, fear flooding back into her voice. "Is my brother okay?" "He's fine. Should be here within the hour. Few of his men took some scrapes, covering the retreat, nothing serious." Marcus guided her toward a chair, his voice gentling. "You're safe now, Emma. You hear me? You're safe." Emma sank into the chair and, for the first time since Ethan had pulled her from that outbuilding, she allowed herself to fully break down. Shoulders, shaking, tears finally spilling over after what had clearly been days of forcing herself to stay composed, to stay strategic, to stay alive. Ethan stood awkwardly near the doorway, feeling suddenly like an intruder on a moment that belonged to people who actually knew each other, who'd actually been fighting for each other long before tonight. Marcus noticed him standing there and tilted his head toward a small back room. "Come on, son, let's get you some coffee. You look like you're about to fall over." The coffee was bitter and lukewarm, but Ethan drank it anyway, sitting at a cluttered desk while Marcus pulled up files on one of his monitors, occasionally glancing over at him with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. "You know," Marcus said eventually, "in 30 years of doing this kind of work, I've seen a lot of people get pulled into situations way over their heads. I imagine I'm not the first." "No, you're not." Marcus took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "But most of them either run the second things get dangerous or they get so caught up in the excitement they forget why they started helping in the first place. You didn't do either." "I just wanted to give back a wallet," Ethan said quietly. "Everything after that just sort of happened." "That's usually how the important stuff happens," Marcus said. "Nobody plans to become the person who saves someone's life. It just shows up one rainy night and asks if you're willing." Ethan didn't have an answer for that, so he just nodded and kept drinking his coffee, listening to the quiet hum of the servers and the distant sound of Emma's crying finally beginning to settle into something calmer. Almost exactly an hour later, the rumble of motorcycles announced Logan's arrival, and Ethan felt something in his chest loosen with relief he hadn't fully realized he was holding. Logan walked in looking exhausted, a fresh cut above one eyebrow, but otherwise unharmed, and the moment Emma saw him, she was on her feet crossing the room in seconds to throw her arms around him. "You scared me," she whispered into his shoulder. "I know," Logan said, holding her tight. "I know, I'm sorry. It's over now." "Is it though?" Emma pulled back, eyes searching his face. "Logan, the people running this, they're still out there. They know we hit the property. They know we have those files." Logan's jaw tightened, the brief moment of relief already giving way to the weight of everything still unresolved. "We'll deal with that. Right now you need rest." "I need answers." "You'll have them after you sleep." Emma looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion finally won out, her shoulders sagging as days of fear and adrenaline caught up with her all at once. Logan guided her toward a small couch against the far wall, and within minutes she was asleep, the stack of ledgers still clutched loosely in her lap. Logan stood watching her for a long moment before finally turning toward Ethan, something heavy and complicated behind his eyes. "You should go home," Logan said quietly. "Your wife's been calling Marcus's emergency line for the past 20 minutes. Ethan's stomach dropped. "What? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because there was nothing you could have done from here except worry," Marcus said gently. "She's not in danger, Ethan. She's just terrified about where her husband disappeared to in the middle of the night." Guilt crashed over Ethan like a physical weight. "I need to go." "I know," Logan said. "Before you do." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope thick with cash, holding it out toward Ethan. Ethan stared at it, something cold settling in his chest. "What is that?" "A thank you for everything you did tonight. You didn't have to come back this far, Ethan. You didn't have to walk into that compound. You could have handed over that memory card and gone home, and instead you... No. Ethan's voice came out sharper than he intended, and he immediately softened it. I'm sorry, but no, I didn't do any of this for money. I know that, Logan said. That's exactly why I'm offering it. Then you understand why I have to say no. Ethan met his eyes steadily. If I take that money now after everything tonight, it changes what this was. It turns it into a transaction. And I need it to stay what it actually was, one person helping another person, because it was the right thing to do. The garage went quiet, even Marcus pausing his typing to watch the exchange. Logan studied Ethan for a long moment, the envelope still extended between them. Something working behind his tired eyes that looked almost like disbelief. Most men, Logan said slowly, would have taken that money from the wallet on the highway, and they sure as hell would take it now. I'm not most men. No, Logan said, finally lowering the envelope, a faint, exhausted smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I'm starting to understand that. I'm starting to understand that real clearly. He tucked the envelope back into his jacket and extended his hand instead. Ethan shook it, the grip firm, something unspoken passing between them that felt far more valuable than any amount of cash. Go home, Ethan, Logan said. Take care of your wife, and know that whatever happens next with all this, he gestured toward Emma's sleeping form, toward the stack of ledgers in her lap. You already did more than anyone could have asked of you. The drive home felt impossibly long. The gray light of early morning spreading slowly across the Montana sky as Ethan finally turned onto his own street, exhaustion settling into every muscle of his body like wet concrete. Claire was waiting on the porch when he pulled into the driveway, wrapped in a blanket. Despite the early summer warmth, her face a mixture of relief and fury that hit Ethan like a physical wave the moment he stepped out of the van. Ethan Brooks, her voice shook. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain where you've been before I lose my mind completely. He walked up the porch steps slowly, every part of him aching, and sat down beside her, taking her hands in his. I found a wallet, he started. By the time he finished the highway, the phone call to Hell's Angels, the dash cam, the drive into the mountains, the gunfire, Emma. Claire was staring at him with an expression he couldn't fully read, somewhere between horror and something that looked almost like awe. You could have died, she finally said, voice trembling. Ethan, you could have actually died out there. I know. Why didn't you just call the police? Why didn't you just leave the wallet and drive away? Because nobody else was going to help her, Claire. The police had already failed her. If I'd walked away, I think about that woman every single day for the rest of my life, wondering what happened to her. He squeezed her hands gently. I couldn't live with that. Not after everything we've already been through. I needed to know I did the right thing even when it cost me something. Claire was quiet for a long moment, tears slipping silently down her face, and then she leaned forward and wrapped her arms around him so tightly it almost hurt. I'm furious with you, she whispered into his shoulder, and I am so proud of you. Both at the same time, as she confirmed, pulling back just enough to look at him, exhaustion and love mixing together in her tired eyes. That's what 20 years of marriage to an idiot with a good heart does to a person. He laughed despite everything, the first real laugh he'd managed in what felt like days, and pulled her close again, just breathing her in, grateful beyond words that he'd made it home to this exact moment. So 3 days passed in a strange, suspended quiet. Ethan went back to work, drove his routes, came home exhausted as always, but something underneath the exhaustion had shifted permanently. He found himself checking his phone more often, half expecting a call from Logan, half dreading it. The call finally came on the fourth evening while Ethan was helping Claire with dinner. Her color noticeably better than it had been in weeks, a small private victory neither of them spoke about out loud. Ethan. Logan's voice sounded different, lighter somehow, though still carrying traces of exhaustion. We need to talk. Can you meet me tomorrow? Is everything okay? Is Emma okay? Emma's fine. Better than fine, actually. That's part of what I need to tell you. They met the next afternoon at a small diner on the edge of town. Logan already seated in a back booth when Ethan arrived, looking healthier than he had at Marcus's garage, the cut above his eyebrow healing into a thin pink line. The files Emma grabbed, Logan said without preamble, sliding a folded newspaper across the table, turned out to be exactly what we hoped. Federal investigators moved on it 2 days ago. Multiple arrests already, more coming. The whole operation's collapsing. Ethan scanned the headline, something settling in his chest at finally seeing concrete proof that the danger, the risk, the terror of that night had actually accomplished something real. That's incredible, Ethan breathed. It is, and none of it happens without you. Logan's eyes were steady on his. I want you to understand that clearly. The wallet, the dash cam footage, the trail through those woods, every single piece of this traces back to one man who refused to take $15,000 off a dark highway. I just did what felt right. I know, you keep saying that. Logan smiled faintly. It still doesn't make it any less remarkable. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Logan spoke again, his tone shifting into something more careful. Ethan, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Your wife, Claire, the medical bills. Logan's eyes held his steadily. How bad is it really? Ethan felt his guard rise instinctively, old habits of pride and embarrassment kicking in. We're managing. That's not an answer. Ethan exhaled slowly, the exhaustion of the past year suddenly pressing down on him in a way he rarely allowed himself to feel in front of anyone. It's bad, Logan. We're drowning. Every treatment that works is another bill we can't pay. I've picked up every extra shift I can find, and it's still not enough. Some nights I lie awake doing math that never comes out right. Logan listened without interrupting, something thoughtful and quiet behind his eyes. Why are you asking me this? Ethan said finally. Because after everything that happened, Logan said, I went looking for a way to thank you. Real thanks, not an envelope of cash you'd refuse anyway. He paused. I found out about Claire's diagnosis, about the debt, about how many hours you're working just to keep your head above water. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest, a familiar instinct to deflect, to insist he didn't need anyone's help, that he could handle this himself the way he'd been handling it for the past year. Logan, I appreciate it, but I told you. I'm not offering you money, Ethan. Logan's voice was firm but gentle. I already know you'd say no. What I did instead was talk to some people. Business contacts, community partners, people who owe this club favors going back years. He leaned forward slightly. There's a foundation run quietly that covers medical debt for families who've fallen through every other crack in the system. No publicity, no strings, just help given because someone decided you deserved it. Ethan stared at him, throat suddenly tight. Logan, I can't. You're not accepting it from me, Logan interrupted gently. You're not taking a single dollar from my hand exactly the way you insisted. This is something completely separate, run by people who already decided to help before they even knew your name. All I did was make sure your file landed on the right desk. Tears burned unexpectedly at the corners of Ethan's eyes, exhaustion and disbelief and overwhelming relief crashing together all at once. Why would you do this? Because you walked back to that highway phone booth with $15,000 and called a stranger instead of driving home, Logan said simply. Because you ran straight at an armed man to protect a woman you'd never met. Because every single time tonight gave you an easy way out, you chose the harder, more honest path instead. His voice softened. People like that don't come around often, Ethan. When they do, the rest of us owe it to them to notice. Ethan sat there overwhelmed, unable to find words adequate to the moment, and finally just nodded, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me, Logan said. Go home and tell your wife the good news. And then go live the kind of life that medical debt's been trying to steal from both of you. That evening, Ethan walked through his front door and found Claire sitting at the kitchen table, the familiar stack of bills spread out in front of her, the same exhausted, defeated expression she wore every time she tried to make sense of numbers that refused to add up. He sat down across from her, took her hands gently, and said the only sentence he could find that felt big enough for everything that had happened. I found someone's wallet, he said quietly, and somehow it changed everything. Claire looked up at him, confused, exhausted, searching his face for an explanation. And as Ethan began to tell her about the foundation, about the debt that was about to disappear, about an entire chapter of fear finally closing for both of them, he watched something shift in his wife's face that he hadn't seen in over a year. Hope. Real, steady, unguarded hope. And for the first time since the diagnosis, since the bills, since the endless nights of exhaustion and worry, Ethan allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst of their fight was finally behind them. 3 months passed, and the change in Claire was something Ethan still found himself staring at, sometimes late at night, just to make sure it was real. Her color had come back first, then her appetite. Then slowly, almost shyly, her laugh. The real one, the one that used to fill their whole kitchen before the diagnosis had quieted it down to something smaller and more careful. "You're staring again," Claire said one morning, not looking up from the eggs she was scrambling, a faint smile already pulling at her mouth. "Can't help it. You're going to be late. Worth it." She swatted him lightly with the spatula, and he caught her wrist, pulling her close for just a moment, breathing her in, grateful in a way he still hadn't found adequate words for. The foundation had come through exactly as Logan promised, quiet, thorough, no strings attached. The crushing weight of medical debt that had been sitting on their kitchen table for over a year simply dissolved line by line, bill by bill, until one afternoon Claire opened an envelope, read it twice, and then sat down hard on the kitchen floor and cried for almost 20 minutes straight. Ethan had sat down next to her on that floor and cried right along with her. But the money disappearing wasn't even the part that changed Ethan the most. It was driving without doing math anymore. For over a year, every single mile he'd driven had come with a silent calculation running in the back of his mind. Gas costs against delivery, pay overtime, hours against treatment costs, what he could skip eating that week to cover what Claire couldn't skip taking. That calculation had become so constant, he'd almost forgotten what driving felt like without it. Now, for the first time in longer than he could remember, the road was just the road. That should have felt like enough. For a while, it almost was. Damn. Logan called on a quiet Tuesday evening, his voice carrying a different kind of weight than Ethan had heard from him before. Not urgency, not danger, something closer to invitation. "There's something happening this weekend," Logan said. "Thought you and Claire might want to be there." "What kind of something?" "Community fundraiser. Bunch of local families hit hard by medical debt, job loss, the kind of stuff that doesn't make headlines but ruins lives quietly. Some of the club's business partners put it together. Food, music, a silent auction." A pause. Figured a man who refused an envelope of cash on the side of a highway might want to see where that money actually goes when it's used right. Ethan smiled despite himself. "We'll be there." The fundraiser was held in a community hall on the edge of town. String lights crisscrossing overhead, the smell of grilled food thick in the air, dozens of families moving through tables covered in donated items and silent auction sheets. Ethan spotted several leather vests scattered among the crowd, men who looked like they belonged on dark highways at midnight instead of folding chairs at community potlucks, laughing with children perched on their shoulders, helping elderly volunteers carry trays of food. Logan found them within minutes, Emma trailing close behind him, looking remarkably different from the exhausted, terrified woman Ethan had pulled out of that outbuilding 3 months earlier. Color had returned to her face. Her eyes, once haunted, now carried something steadier. "Ethan Brooks." Emma pulled him into a hug before he could even react. "I never properly thanked you." "You don't have to thank me." "I absolutely do." She pulled back, studying him with an expression that mixed gratitude and something close to wonder. "Logan told me what you did, running at that man with nothing but a tree branch. It wasn't my finest strategic moment. It was the bravest thing anyone's done for me in my entire life," Emma said simply, and Ethan didn't have an answer for that, so he just nodded, throat tightening unexpectedly. Claire stood beside him, watching this exchange with quiet pride, her hand finding his and squeezing gently. Later, after the food and the auction, and the easy conversation that flowed more naturally than Ethan expected between his world and Logan's, Logan pulled him aside near the edge of the hall, 2 beers in hand, offering one to Ethan. "Federal case is moving fast," Logan said quietly. "More arrests this week. Looks like it's reaching higher than anyone expected, people with real money, real connections." "Are you safe?" Ethan asked, an old worry flickering back to life. "Is Emma safe?" "Safer every day the investigation moves forward." Logan took a slow sip of his beer. "Funny thing about exposing people like that. Once it starts, it doesn't stop. Too many guilty people scrambling to save themselves by giving up everyone else." "Good. Good," Logan agreed, and they stood there for a moment in comfortable silence, watching the crowd, watching the string lights sway gently overhead. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said eventually. "Go ahead." "Why me that night? You could have handled the wallet a dozen different ways. Why did you trust a complete stranger with any of this?" Logan considered the question as seriously, the kind of consideration that told Ethan he'd actually thought about this before. Because in this life, Logan said slowly, you learn pretty fast who tells the truth when nobody's watching, and who only tells the truth when they think someone might catch them in the lie. You proved which one you were in about 30 seconds standing on a dark highway in the pouring rain, holding $15,000 that could have solved every problem you had. He looked at Ethan directly. That's not something you can fake, Ethan. Either it's in you or it isn't. And if it had gone differently, if I'd kept the money, then I'd have been wrong about you, Logan said simply, and I'd have spent that whole night chasing the wrong lead instead of the right one. He clinked his bottle gently against Ethan's. Lucky for both of us, I wasn't wrong. Word of what happened that night never made headlines, never turned into a story, splashed across local news exactly the way both Logan and Ethan preferred it. But word moved anyway, the way it always does in small communities. Quiet conversations passed between neighbors, a kind of respect that didn't need broadcasting to be real. Ethan noticed it in small ways. The gas station attendant who started waving him through without charging for his coffee. The mechanic who fixed his van's brakes and refused payment, muttering something about taking care of good people. Claire's old students, now grown, stopping by occasionally just to check in, drawn by something in the community that had shifted, however quietly, in the months since that rainy night on Highway 93. Ethan didn't need the recognition. He'd never wanted it, but there was something undeniably healing about watching kindness move through a community, like water finding its level, settling into every crack it could reach. 6 months after that night, Ethan found himself back at the community hall, this time volunteering at a similar fundraiser, helping carry folding tables, setting up chairs, working alongside men in leather vests, and grandmothers in floral dresses with equal ease. Logan worked beside him most of the afternoon, the two of them falling into an easy rhythm that no longer felt strange or unlikely. You ever think about it? Logan asked at one point, hauling a table into position. That night, how different things would have turned out if you just kept driving past that wallet. Ethan thought about it more than he probably should have late at night, sometimes staring at the ceiling beside a peacefully sleeping Claire, replaying the moment he had almost driven away. All the time, Ethan admitted. Honestly, some nights it scares me more now than it did then. Back then, I didn't have time to think about how badly it could have gone. Now I just see how many different ways that night could have ended completely differently. But it didn't. No, Ethan agreed, it didn't. You know what I think about, Logan said, straightening up, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cool evening air. I think about how close we came to losing Emma because of one decision that almost went the other way. Not your decision. The decision the people running that operation made, betting that an exhausted, desperate man would take the easy money and disappear. He shook his head slowly. They built their entire plan around the assumption that desperate people make selfish choices. They were wrong about you, and that mistake cost them everything. Lucky for Emma. Lucky for a lot of people, Logan corrected. That trafficking operation didn't just have Emma. Marcus's research turned up at least a dozen other victims once the federal investigation got moving. People with names, families, people who'd been completely forgotten by a system that didn't care enough to look for them. His voice hardened slightly. All of that unravels because one delivery driver couldn't bring himself to keep money that wasn't his. Ethan absorbed that weight quietly, the true scope of that single decision settling deeper into him than it had before. He hadn't just saved Emma that night. He'd pulled a thread that unraveled an entire web of suffering he'd never even known existed. I didn't do it to be a hero, Ethan said quietly. I want you to know that. I wasn't thinking about any of this when I picked up that phone by DeLeon. I was just thinking about what kind of man I wanted to be able to look at in the mirror. I know, Logan said. That's exactly why it worked. That winter, almost a full year after the night that changed everything, Claire's doctors delivered news that both of them had stopped allowing themselves to hope for out loud. Remission. Not just improvement. Not just stable numbers. Full remission confirmed across multiple tests, the kind of news that made the doctors smile in a way doctors rarely allowed themselves to smile. Ethan and Claire sat in the parking lot afterward, engine off. Neither of them speaking for a long time, simply holding hands and breathing in a future that finally felt unguarded for the first time in over 2 years. We made it, Claire finally whispered. We made it. Ethan agreed, voice thick with everything he didn't have words for. That evening, they called Logan together, putting him on speaker in their kitchen. And when Ethan delivered the news, the silence on the other end stretched out long enough that Ethan wondered if the call had dropped. Logan, you there? I'm here. Logan's voice came out rougher than usual, thick with something he was clearly fighting to control. That's Ethan, that's the best thing I've heard all year. We wouldn't have made it without you, Claire said, leaning toward the phone. Without that foundation, without the help, I don't know if we could have. You'd have found a way, Logan interrupted gently. People like you two always do. We just made the road a little shorter, that's all. After they hung up, Claire looked at Ethan with an expression he'd come to recognize over the past year. Pride, love, and something deeper that had grown between them through every hardship they'd survived together. You know, she said quietly, I used to think the worst night of my life was the day I got that diagnosis. Now I think the most important night of my life was the one where you found a stranger's wallet on a dark highway. Funny how that works. It's not funny, Claire said, taking his hand. It's just true. Sometimes the worst circumstances accidentally lead you toward the best version of yourself. You found out exactly who you are that night, Ethan, and I got to watch it happen. Years from now, when people in that small Montana town told the story, and people did tell it quietly the way meaningful stories travel through communities without ever needing a headline, they rarely focused on the trafficking ring that collapsed or the federal arrests that followed, or even the dramatic rescue in those dark mountain woods. They focused on the wallet, on a single ordinary man exhausted and desperate and drowning in debt, standing alone on a rainy highway with $15,000 in his hands and absolutely nothing forcing him to do the right thing except the simple, stubborn refusal to become someone he couldn't respect. Logan Carter and Ethan Brooks never became business partners. They never sought publicity, never gave interviews, never let their unlikely friendship become anything louder than what it actually was. Two men from completely different worlds who'd recognized in each other the same unshakable principle. Character isn't built in the moments when people are watching. It's revealed in the moments when they're not. The wallet that fell into Ethan Brooks's headlights that rainy Montana night looked for one brief and terrifying moment like the answer to every prayer he and Claire had been too exhausted to keep praying. It would have been so easy to take it, so easy to justify it, so easy to convince himself that desperate circumstances excused a desperate choice. Instead, that wallet became something far more powerful than $15,000 ever could have been. It became the moment an entire family was reunited, the moment a trafficking operation finally collapsed under the weight of its own cruelty, the moment a community quietly closed ranks around two people who needed help and found it in the most unexpected place imaginable. And it became the moment when a ordinary exhausted delivery driver discovered that his integrity, the one thing in his life that medical bills could never touch, that debt could never claim, that desperation could never fully erase, was worth infinitely more than any amount of cash lying in the rain. Money can solve a problem for a season, but integrity can change a life forever. And sometimes the smallest act of honesty, one phone call made in the dark with everything to lose and nothing forcing the decision except a man's own quiet sense of who he wanted to be, is enough to open a door that fate had been waiting all along to unlock.